The grand warship Vishera Prime floated in the darkness of space, a silent reminder of the Empire's strength. Inside its halls, an important meeting was about to take place. Delegates from the United Earth Federation had arrived, seeking peace or, at the very least, understanding. But the Vishera were a warrior race. They did not believe in peace. They believed in power. At the center of it all stood Princess Kalara, the heir to the Vishera Empire. She was not just a ruler by blood, but a warrior by heart. She had trained since childhood, studying battle, strategy, and the history of conquest. Her people saw her as the future of their empire, the one who would lead them to even greater victories. But Kalara was not satisfied. She had never met anyone who could challenge her, not in combat, not in mind, not in spirit. Her golden eyes scanned the humans as they entered the meeting hall. Most of them looked nervous, their movements careful. Humans were smaller, weaker, fragile compared to her kind, yet they had built an empire that spread across many stars. That alone made them interesting. But one human caught her attention immediately. He was not the tallest, nor did he wear the finest uniform, but something about his presence stood out. His calm, steady gaze met hers without fear. He did not flinch under her piercing stare. Unlike the others, he did not seem nervous. He was watching her just as she was watching him. Captain Daniel Reeves, one of the human diplomats, introduced him. Tactical officer of the Federation fleet. Kalara tilted her head slightly. A tactician. That explained his confidence. The humans had survived against powerful enemies because of their ability to think differently, to adapt. She had read about their battles, how they turned impossible odds into victories. And now, standing before her, was one of their finest minds. The discussions began, filled with formal words and political phrases. Kalara found it boring. The humans wanted peace, but they offered nothing in return. Peace was meaningless without strength. The Vishera respected power above all else. And then Daniel spoke. "Your empire believes that we are weak," he said, his voice calm yet firm. "But strength is not just about size or weapons. It is about strategy, intelligence, and the ability to adapt. That is why humanity still stands." A murmur passed through the Vishera leaders. No human had ever spoken so boldly in their presence. Some of them looked offended, but Kalara, she smiled. For the first time in years, she felt something other than routine. This human had confidence. He had a warrior's spirit. "If you believe humans are so strong," Kalara said, stepping forward, "then prove it." The room fell silent. Daniel didn't hesitate. "How?" Kalara's golden eyes gleamed. "A battle simulation. A test of strategy. If your mind is as strong as you claim, let us see it in action." The human delegation whispered among themselves, unsure if it was a challenge they should accept. But Daniel, he simply nodded. Kalara's heart pounded with anticipation. For the first time, she might have found someone worth fighting. The training arena of the Vishera warship was no ordinary battleground. It was a massive simulation hall, capable of creating realistic war scenarios. The walls shimmered with energy as holographic landscapes shifted, forming mountains, rivers, and battlefields. This was where Vishera warriors trained for war. No human had ever set foot inside. Captain Daniel Reeves stood at the center, calm but focused. Around him, tall, armored Vishera soldiers watched in amusement. To them, this was a game, one they had already won before it even began. At the far end of the arena, Princess Kalara observed closely. She had studied humans, their battles, their history. They were adaptable, unpredictable. But could they truly match the Vishera, a race bred for war? A deep voice echoed through the hall. "Begin the simulation." The battlefield came to life. Giant walls rose, forming an abandoned city with narrow streets, broken buildings, and dark alleys. Two teams appeared, one led by Kalara, the other by Daniel. The challenge: capture the opponent's base. Simple, yet deadly. The battle begins. Kaelura moved like a shadow through the ruins, her warriors following her lead. Her strategy was flawless, aggressive, precise, unstoppable. She had won countless battles this way. In her mind, this would be no different. But then something unexpected happened. Daniel's forces vanished. Instead of facing the Vashera head-on, they scattered into the ruins. No formation, no direct combat. It was chaos, or so it seemed. Kaelura narrowed her eyes. This wasn't retreat. This was something else. Suddenly, one of her warriors fell into a trap, an explosion of light disabling their sensors. Another was ambushed from behind, taken out without a sound. Daniel was not fighting like a Vashera. He was fighting like a human. He used the environment, hiding in shadows, setting distractions, moving in ways that confused her soldiers. The Vashera were strong, but they were used to direct combat. Daniel was using tricks, deception, and unpredictability. Kaelura's heart raced with excitement. The mind of a warrior. She changed her approach, adapting to Daniel's tactics. But every time she adjusted, he changed again. "He's reading my moves," she whispered to herself. No one had ever done that before. The battle continued for over an hour. Both sides lost warriors, but the humans held their ground. Finally, Kaelura pushed forward, leading a final charge toward Daniel's base. This was it. The end. Or so she thought. As her forces moved in, a voice rang through the arena. "Simulation complete. Victory. Captain Daniel Reeves." Kaelura froze. Her warriors looked around in shock. The base she had charged into. It was empty. Daniel had moved his real base without her realizing. While she had been fighting shadows, he had won the battle without even needing to fight her directly. Kaelura's eyes locked onto Daniel. He stood there, arms crossed, a small, knowing smile on his face. For the first time in her life, Kaelura felt something strange. She had lost. And she loved it. Silence filled the training arena. The Vashera warriors stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Their princess had lost, not in a real battle, but in a war simulation against a human. Kaelura clenched her fists. This was impossible. No one had ever bested her in strategy. She had fought countless warriors, led her forces into battle after battle, and always emerged victorious. But today, Captain Daniel Reeves had outmaneuvered her. And the worst part, she wasn't angry. She was excited. Daniel stood at the other end of the arena, calm and composed. He wasn't gloating, wasn't celebrating. He simply watched her, as if waiting for her reaction. That made Kaelura's blood boil, not in rage, but in curiosity. She took a deep breath, stepping forward. The warriors around her moved aside, watching in awe as their princess approached the human who had challenged and defeated her. "You fought well," Kaelura said, her voice steady. Daniel nodded. "So did you." It was close. A small smirk formed on Kaelura's lips. It wasn't close, and they both knew it. He had played her like a game of strategy, turning her strengths into weaknesses. He had expected her aggression, used her direct nature against her. "You did not fight like a warrior," she said, studying him closely. "You fought like a shadow, never revealing your full strength. That is not the way of the Vashera." "It's the way of humans," Daniel replied. "We don't have your strength, your size, or your endurance, so we fight with our minds." Kaelura tilted her head. "And that is why you are dangerous." Daniel didn't respond, but she saw the slightest shift in his expression. He understood the weight of her words. Respect earned in battle. The warriors watching them were still tense, waiting for Kaelura to react. In their culture, losing meant weakness, and weakness was never tolerated. But Kaelura had never been like the others. She turned to her soldiers. This human fought with skill, with intelligence, and he won. That is something to respect. A few of them still looked uneasy, but none dared to argue. If their princess acknowledged the human's strength, so would they. Daniel raised an eyebrow. I wasn't expecting that. Kalara chuckled. Expectations mean little in war, Captain Reeves. You should know that better than anyone. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself a small smile. She was enjoying this. An unexpected invitation. As the simulation chamber powered down, Kalara walked beside Daniel. She had questions, many questions. You studied my tactics before the battle, didn't you? She asked. Of course, Daniel admitted. I read reports, watched recordings of your past training sessions. I knew you would strike aggressively. And you used that against me, she said, narrowing her eyes. You learn fast. Daniel shrugged. That's how humans survive. We observe, adapt, and overcome. Kalara stopped walking, turning to face him. This human intrigued her more than any warrior she had ever met. He wasn't physically imposing like the Vishera. He wasn't bred for war. And yet, he had won. A bold thought crossed her mind. I want to see more of your tactics, Captain, she said. Come with me. Daniel blinked. Go where? Kalara smirked. To the battlefield. A dangerous offer. Daniel frowned slightly. Are you suggesting a real battle? Not a war, she clarified. A mission. There are skirmishes along the outer colonies. You will join me, and we will fight together. I want to see if your skills hold up outside a simulation. The offer was insane. No human had ever fought alongside the Vishera in a real battle. It was risky, dangerous, unpredictable. And yet, Daniel felt something stir inside him. Excitement, challenge, a chance to test himself against the unknown. He took a deep breath, then nodded. All right, Princess. Let's see what happens. Kalara's smile widened. This was going to be interesting. The warship Vishera's honor cut through the void of space, heading toward a conflict zone near the Keldari outpost. The tension inside the ship was heavy. No human had ever stepped onto a battlefield alongside the Vishera before. Captain Daniel Reeves stood near the command deck, watching the battle briefing unfold before him. A large hologram displayed the Keldari outpost, a Vishera-controlled planet currently under attack by rogue war clans, exiles who had turned against their own empire. Princess Kalara stood at the front, her golden armor gleaming under the ship's artificial lights. Her presence alone commanded respect. She turned to her warriors, her piercing gaze sweeping over them. We do not fight for conquest today, she said. We fight to protect our own. The exiled war clans think they can take what belongs to the Vishera. They are wrong. The warriors roared in agreement, their voices shaking the walls. But Daniel, he stayed quiet, analyzing every detail. Kalara turned her gaze to him. Captain Reeves, this will be your first real battle alongside my warriors. Are you ready? Daniel crossed his arms. I'm always ready. But tell me, what's the enemy's weakness? Kalara smirked. Direct as always, human. She pointed to the hologram. The war clans rely on brute force. They will charge into battle with no strategy, no coordination. They overwhelm by numbers. Daniel nodded. And what's our advantage? Kalara's eyes gleamed. You. The landing. The drop ships roared as they entered the atmosphere. Flames licked the hulls as they cut through the sky, descending toward the battlefield below. Daniel gripped his seat, feeling the vibrations shake through his bones. This was nothing like the simulations. The real battlefield was alive, filled with chaos, smoke, and the distant sound of war drums. The moment the ramp slammed open, the Vishera warriors surged forward, their weapons humming with energy. Daniel followed, keeping low as he scanned the field. Ahead, he saw the enemy, towering Vishera exiles in ragged armor, wielding massive plasma axes and blasters. They charged without hesitation, their war cries shaking the ground. Kalara was already in the fight, moving like a storm. Her blade sliced through enemies with precision, her strength undeniable. She was fierce, unstoppable. Daniel, on the other hand, didn't rely on brute strength. He relied on his mind. The human strategy. He noticed something quickly. The exiles weren't thinking. They attacked head-on, focusing only on the strongest Vashura warriors. They ignored the terrain, the surroundings. That was their mistake. Daniel darted into cover, using the rubble and smoke as an advantage. He moved fast, setting up distractions, flanking from angles they didn't expect. A massive exile swung a plasma axe at him. Too slow. Daniel rolled under it, planting a charge on the enemy's back. Boom! The warrior fell, dazed. Kalara saw it all, and for the first time in battle, she laughed. This is how humans fight. She called out, slicing through another enemy. Daniel grinned. We fight to win, princess. Turning the tide. The battle was brutal. The exiles outnumbered them, but Daniel's tactics started shifting the tide. He led small squads, guiding them through alternate paths. Instead of fighting directly, they ambushed, set traps, used the enemy's aggression against them. The exiles became frustrated, confused. Their blind charge had turned into chaos. Kalara saw it all unfold and knew this was why she had brought him. The final blow came when Daniel spotted the enemy's leader, a towering exile with dark red armor. Kalara, take him out, and they'll break. He called out. Kalara didn't hesitate. She leaped forward, her blade finding its mark. The exile leader fell, and the rest of the warriors hesitated. That hesitation was all it took. The Vashura pressed forward, pushing them back. The battle was won. A warrior's respect. As the dust settled, Kalara walked toward Daniel, her golden armor covered in battle scars. She looked at him, not as a human, not as an outsider, but as an equal. You fight well, Captain, she said. Daniel wiped the sweat from his brow. You're not bad yourself, princess. Kalara smirked. This human was something else, and for the first time in her life, she wondered, what else was he capable of? The battlefield was quiet. Smoke still rose from the fallen exiles, and the air was thick with the scent of scorched metal and plasma burns. The Vashura warriors moved among the fallen, collecting their injured and securing the outpost. Captain Daniel Reeves stood at the edge of the ruins, scanning the wreckage. His human instincts told him something was wrong. This was too easy. The exiles had been fierce, but they had broken too quickly. Beside him, Princess Kalara adjusted her battle-worn armor, her sharp eyes narrowing. You sense it too, she said. Daniel nodded. Yeah, this isn't over. Suddenly, a sharp alarm blared through the outpost. The Vashura warriors snapped to attention as a scout ran toward them, breathless. Princess, a second wave is coming. Twice the number, heavily armed. Kalara's jaw clenched. The exiles hadn't been fighting to win before. They had been testing them. Daniel exhaled sharply. They wanted us to get comfortable. Smart move. Kalara turned to her warriors, her voice steady and commanding. Form defensive lines. Reinforce the barriers. We hold this ground. Daniel grabbed his rifle and checked his ammo. Looks like we're in for a real fight. A desperate stand. The second wave came fast, dropships streaking across the sky, unloading warriors into the ruins. The ground trembled as the enemy advanced, their war cries louder than before. Daniel, using the broken terrain to his advantage, took position on higher ground. Kalara, we need choke points. Funnel them where they can't use their numbers. Kalara nodded and shouted orders. The Vashura rerouted their defenses, forcing the exiles through tight corridors and narrow alleyways. When the enemy charged, they were bottlenecked, unable to spread out. That's when Daniel and the warriors unleashed their firepower. Plasma shots rained down, cutting through their ranks. But the exiles were relentless. Even as they fell, more pushed forward. Kalara fought at the front, her blades flashing in the dim light. Daniel covered her from behind, picking off enemies with precise shots. Still, the exiles kept coming. They had to end this. Fast. The humans gamble. Daniel ducked behind cover, his mind racing. There had to be a way to break them. He scanned the battlefield, looking for an advantage. Then he saw it. The exiles were using a command ship in orbit to send constant reinforcements. Kalara. Their command ship. That's how they're flooding the battlefield. Kalara followed his gaze, realization hitting her. You have a plan. Daniel smirked. Yeah, but you're not gonna like it. The dangerous mission. Minutes later, Daniel and Kalara raced toward a captured enemy dropship. You really think this will work? Kalara asked, strapping in. Daniel powered up the ship. It's risky, but if we take out that command ship, they lose their reinforcements. Kalara's eyes gleamed. Then we make them pay. The dropship blasted off, dodging enemy fire as it shot toward space. Inside the enemy command ship, alarms blared. The exiles had spotted them. Daniel and Kalara had only minutes before they were intercepted. Daniel checked the ship's systems. Get ready to fight. Kalara smirked, gripping her blade. I always am. As the enemy fleet closed in, the real battle had just begun. The enemy command ship loomed ahead, its massive hull covered in thick armor. Enemy fighters swarmed around it, moving fast, trying to stop the captured dropship carrying Daniel Reeves and Princess Kalara. Inside the cockpit, Daniel gripped the controls tightly, dodging the laser fire streaking toward them. Hold on, he shouted as he pulled the ship into a sharp roll, narrowly avoiding an explosion. Kalara, strapped in beside him, watched the enemy fighters closing in. We can't outfly them forever, she said. We need to get inside that command ship. Daniel's eyes scanned the battlefield. Then we crash in. Kalara smirked. I like your style. A daring infiltration. Daniel pushed the ship's thrusters to max speed, heading straight for the enemy vessel. The exiles fired everything they had, but the dropship zigzagged through the barrage. Impact in 5 seconds. Daniel warned. Kalara grabbed her weapons. I'm ready. With a deafening crash, the dropship pierced through the enemy hull, tearing through metal before coming to a halt inside the main hangar. Smoke and sparks filled the air. As the dust settled, Daniel unbuckled himself. We made it. You okay? Kalara was already on her feet, blades drawn. Let's finish this. Fighting through the enemy ship. The moment they stepped out, enemy soldiers swarmed them. Plasma bolts filled the air, but Daniel and Kalara fought like a perfect team. Daniel took cover behind a crate, firing precise shots, each one dropping an enemy. Kalara moved like lightning, her blades flashing, cutting through the exiles who got too close. They pushed forward, clearing hallway after hallway. Daniel pointed at a locked blast door ahead. The command bridge is behind there. Kalara nodded. Then we break in. A deadly trap. As they approached the door, the ship's intercom crackled to life. A deep voice spoke. So, the princess fights alongside a human. How pathetic. Kalara's eyes narrowed. General Vorik, she growled. Show yourself. Laughter echoed. You have walked into your own doom. Suddenly, turrets dropped from the ceiling, unleashing rapid plasma fire. Daniel barely dove behind cover in time. This guy doesn't play fair. Kalara rushed forward with impossible speed, slicing through the turrets before they could fully aim at her. Sparks flew as the defenses collapsed. Daniel exhaled. Remind me never to fight you. Kalara smirked. Then don't betray me. Confronting the general. The blast door slid open, revealing the enemy command bridge. At the center stood General Vorik, a towering Vashera exile in black armor. Vorik turned, his reptilian eyes glowing. You should have stayed in your palace, princess. Kalara stepped forward. You should have stayed in exile. With a roar, Vorik charged at her, his massive sword swinging. Kalara blocked with her twin blades, sparks flying as metal clashed. Daniel took aim at the command console. Destroy the controls, and the fleet would fall into chaos. But before he could fire, guards tackled him from behind, knocking his rifle away. The tide turns. Daniel fought back, using his human strength and speed. He dodged a strike and slammed an elbow into his attacker's face, then grabbed a fallen plasma pistol and took out the other guard. Kalara and Vorik's battle was fierce. Each strike shook the bridge. But Vorik was bigger, stronger. He knocked Kalara back, sending her crashing against the wall. Vorik laughed. "You are weak." Kalara wiped blood from her lip. "I am Vashera." She launched forward with unmatched speed, dodging Vorik's blade and driving her own sword into his chest. The general staggered, eyes wide, before collapsing. Daniel fired at the control panel, overloading the ship's systems. Alarms blared, and the ship began to shake. Kalara ran to him. Time to go. They sprinted toward an escape pod as the enemy ship exploded behind them. Victory and unspoken feelings. The escape pod shot through space, racing back toward the planet. Below, the Vashera warriors cheered as the enemy fleet fell into chaos without leadership. Inside the pod, Daniel glanced at Kalara. "Not bad for a human, huh?" Kalara looked at him, something unreadable in her eyes. "You are more than just human, Daniel Reeves." The battle was won, but something deeper had changed between them, and Kalara was beginning to realize it. The escape pod raced through the burning sky, cutting through the atmosphere like a falling star. Inside, Daniel and Kalara braced themselves as the pod shuddered from the heat. Daniel gripped the controls. "Hold tight. We're coming in fast." Kalara clenched the sides of her seat, but kept her eyes on him. She had fought in countless battles, but something about this human made her feel alive in a way she never had before. With a final jolt, the pod slammed into the ground, skidding across the rocky battlefield before coming to a stop. The aftermath of war. As the hatch opened, the sight outside was breathtaking. The battlefield was silent. The enemy fleet was broken, their command ship reduced to fiery wreckage in the sky. The Vashera warriors stood victorious, their banners raised high. A cheer erupted when they saw Kalara and Daniel step out of the pod. Commander Velik, Kalara's second-in-command, ran forward. "Princess, we thought you were lost." Kalara smirked. "You should know by now. I don't fall so easily." Daniel dusted himself off. "And I'm still alive too, you know. Maybe a little credit for the human." Velik gave him a long look, then nodded. "You fight well, human, perhaps too well." Kalara turned to her warriors. "We have won the battle, but now we must rebuild. The traitors are defeated, but our duty is not over." A proud roar rose from the Vashera ranks. A hard goodbye. As the Vashera forces secured their victory, Daniel stood at the edge of the battlefield, looking up at the sky. His mission was over. Kalara approached him, her golden armor reflecting the setting sun. "You are thinking of leaving." Daniel nodded. "I was never meant to stay here. I have a home, somewhere out there." Kalara's expression was unreadable. "You saved my people. You saved me. I owe you everything." Daniel smiled. "You don't owe me anything, Princess. We fought together, and that's what matters." For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of everything they had been through hung between them. Then Kalara said, "Come with me." Daniel blinked. "What?" She stepped closer. "My people will need guidance, a new way forward. The war has shown us that strength is not just in battle, but in unity. And you are different from any warrior I have ever known." Daniel chuckled. "So, what, you want me to be your royal advisor?" Kalara smirked. "Something like that. Maybe more." A decision that changed everything. Daniel looked around. The planet, the people, the warriors who had fought for their future. He had never belonged anywhere before, always drifting. But here, he had found something real. He met Kalara's eyes. "All right, Princess. I'll stay." Kaelura's smirk softened into something else, something rare, a smile. And as the twin suns set over the battlefield, Daniel knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning.